Book 5, Salem, Safety Assured Leaving East of Medicetti, Chapter 29. Any new predictions for the next year? In the middle of harvest, Mari woke up with a smile, even though many of her muscles ached. It was harvest season, after all. She and her family had been learning that in Salem, everyone brings in the harvest. Even General Shin, who, while hurrying to get all of the new towers constructed before the snows came, was tasked to carry pumpkins. And while the Shins were initially worried, and admittedly a little put out that they were required to help harvest their neighbors' gardens, they soon got over that. Because in Salem, everybody worked. And when everybody worked, the task was finished in astonishing time. They witnessed that with Jates's immense garden, which had flourished. Within a couple of hours, dozens of neighbors had congregated on her garden, harvested all of the potatoes, and moved a few £100 into her and the Shins' cellars, then pulled up everything else and neatly organized the produce into baskets, most designated for their cellars, the surplus to go to the storehouse. Rector Bustani was there too, going over numbers and making recommendations. But the final decision, he told them, was theirs as to what they kept and what they donated. At first, Mari fretted with Jatesy that maybe they were giving away too much, but when they saw the stacks of goods in the cellar, and then saw a wagon come down the lane with bags of flour, oats, and even sugar, intended to get them through the snowing season, they realized they had more than enough. But should you find yourself running out, Rector Bustani told them as he checked off items on his extensive list, let me know. We can get you more from the storehouse should you discover by the end of snowing season that you need something, like beans. Mari had chuckled at that. It wouldn't be beans we'd need, she assured him, not in our house. But maybe bacon. We're not quite ready to go meatless yet. Their rector had smiled. That's all right. Choices always in Salem. If you need more bacon, then let me know. We try to get every household well stocked in harvest, so that we don't have to drive the wagons through knee-deep snows. Here comes the first loads of Mr. Brighter's hay for his herd. Jatesy and Mari had stared open-mouthed as two massive wagons with hay rumbled to their drive on the way to their barn, where Deck was waving to give them directions. They closed their mouths when the blowing straw began to fall onto them. Without thinking, Jatesy said, "But we can't afford all of—" And then she remembered where she lived. Bustani patted her on the shoulder. You just donated about 300 pounds of potatoes, along with onions, corn, and beans, and 3 head of beef. By the way, the cobbler will be by later to fit you all for new boots for the snow. And I've got you listed to receive new coats, additional blankets, scarves, and hats. You can submit your sizes and color preferences to my wife, and she'll help you get fitted. Mari didn't feel any hesitancy after that about laboring 2 days a week in neighboring farms, along with her husband and son. Never before had she so enjoyed digging for carrots in the dirt, or plucking tomatoes off of vines, because never before had she heard so much laughter in fields, or so many stories, or so much singing. That was a little hard for Perrin to adjust to, as he hefted baskets of produce which his neighbors had filled, to load into wagons destined for others' homes or the storehouses. Mari recognized his dinner smile as men put an arm around his shoulders and belted out little ditties about something Perrin found inane, like the joy of squirrels. They'd jostle him good-naturedly, wanting him to join in on the chorus, but he'd replied with a pained smile, I don't know the words. I'll teach you. You must have a great bass voice. I don't want to know the words. In the world, officers weren't allowed to sing. Something in the way his smile turned brittle would finally nudge at the men that maybe General Shin really wasn't the singing type, and that he should be allowed to move a few more bags of grain. While the harvest required every Salemite's labor, still it took only a few hours a day, and because of the rotation cycle, only a couple of times a week. This afternoon, Pato will be working at a vineyard after his university classes in botany and geography, while Mari would take care of Salema so Jatesy could be at Rector Young's daughter-in-law's house, learning how to make something called applesauce with the bruised apples from the rector's orchard. In the world, bruised apples were tossed to the pigs, or tossed in the river. In Salem, they were turned into a tasty preserve. Everything in Salem, it seemed, was preserved. Nothing was thrown away. It took Mari a few weeks to realize that there was no rubbish heaps in Salem, as there were in the fringes of villages in the world. Even broken bottles and dishes were reused, and a building in Salem, next to the largest storehouse, was filled with discarded items, free for the taking by whomever wanted to tinker with them. The supply in there changed frequently, because Salemites enjoyed the challenge of turning something broken into something useful again. Today, Perrin wouldn't be harvesting or shifting melons, because he was heading north to check on lumber supplies for his towers. But first, Mari had some business to conduct. She rolled over and gently poked him awake. "We're supposed to have a talk today." "Why?" he mumbled miserably into his pillow. "Do you always do these things so early in the morning?" "Because you're supposed to be getting up early anyway, remember?" "Your tower construction. Up in Norden, Calla's mother is expecting you." Perrin groaned. "Oh, yeah, that's one exuberant woman." "She's just eager to please." "Sure. I thought you'd be more worried about Mr. Travato." "I don't think he could have any more questions for me." "It's been 3 moons since the wedding. I'm sure he has a new list." "And, of course, he would happen to be the best logger in the area." Perrin sighed and rolled onto his back. "Maybe we should make the tower out of block instead." "Don't worry. You'll be home late tonight, but you really could stay the night there. The Travato sent a message again last week, reminding us that they have plenty of room to house you." "No, thank you. Calla told me the whole family is invited for midday meal today. Her mother wanted to know my favorite foods." "Calla said my mother's recipes reminded her of Mrs. Travato's cooking. Maybe she and my mother are distantly related." "You said we were supposed to have a talk this morning?" Perrin reminded her. "Yes, it's been 1 year." He frowned. 1 year since what? "Since you looked into my eyes and asked me what I knew. Since I told you that I knew nothing. That I predicted a very dull year in our future, with the only exciting thing happening was the cat fathering a litter of kittens. The 48th day of harvest, 338. Perrin began to chuckle. "Oh, that's right. I forgot all about that day when we both figured out Jatesy was expecting. Well, you certainly didn't predict that very dull year correctly, did you?" "No, and I'm admitting that now." "Let's see how much you got wrong," Perrin said. "First, I'm no longer a colonel." "That's right. You're a general." He shrugged. "Merely a title, since I have no army." "But it's also for the other side," she pointed out. "So that's quite an achievement." "Indeed." Perrin nodded in amused thoughtfulness. "Our daughter is now a mother, making us grandparents. Ugh, still an uncomfortable word. Anyway, we have a new house. They have a new house. We have new furniture. New lives, just leave it at that," Mari suggested. Shem was revealed to be a spy, who is now married, and Pato no longer kicks balls, but studies trees and terrain at the university, is tending a young orchard in the back garden, and he and I have been on 6 camping trips so far looking for roots. Perrin finished. Did I miss anything? The cat fathered another batch of kittens," Mari offered. "The family down the road now have 5 black and white kittens in their barn." "Well, that's nothing new for him." Perrin waved that off. "Ah, but you changed the world." changed Idamia's laws, and you teach the whole community now instead of the budding thieves of Edge. It's rather nice to lecture people each week who actually want to hear what I have to say, and not because they're going to report it to Captain Thorne. Mari smiled, ignoring the first two accomplishments in Perrin's list. And one more thing we forgot that changed over the past year. Yes? She asked. We all died. Mari burst out laughing. How could I forget that? Perrin grinned. Any new predictions for the next year? Perhaps I should write this down. Actually, I do, she smiled, as she ran her fingers through his hair. He hadn't cut it since his resignation nearly half a year ago, nor had Shem cut his. They were rebelling against their past lives of short hair and all the regimentation it stood for. Kella, when she noticed a few weeks ago that both men's hair had similar waves, probably inherited from their shared ancestors, declared that no man should have prettier hair than his wife. The wives decided they could live with their husbands' shaggier looks as long as neither of them grew their hair longer than their shoulders and kept their chins bare. Mari had grown used to a smoothly shaved face and told Perrin she would never kiss him again if he let his beard grow. Kella didn't have to make that threat because Shem couldn't have grown a beard like many of the men in Salem sported anyway. Mari twisted a curly lock behind Perrin's ear that she wished Jatesy could have inherited, instead of her mother's blandly straight hair. But Selima's tufty black hair already showed signs of curling. First prediction, Shem and Kella will have a baby. I can believe that, Perrin nodded. Guide Glees told him that too. Although I don't know if Shem's face can take it. I swear he hasn't quit grinning since their wedding. The man has bugs in his teeth. He deserves to grin. My next prediction, Jatesy and Deckett will be expecting again by this time next year. Maybe. And here's my big one. Are you ready? Pato will fall in love. Ha! Perrin barked. Now that one I should write down because that, Mrs. Shin, is by far the most ridiculous. I didn't say get married, Mari clarified. I just said fall in love. Pato won't stand for it. He wants to, though. How do you know? Mother's intuition. Perrin scoffed. Mother's intuition. Mother's wishful thinking, maybe. Do you have any predictions, Mr. Shin? Yes. You'll keep waking me up early for ridiculous conversations when I could have been getting another 5 minutes sleep. Just for that, I'll send a message ahead of you to Mrs. Travato, saying that you will be staying the night so you can get some decent sleep. You wouldn't dare. I would dare, but I don't want to. Good. I kind of like you. I'd miss you if I stayed away tonight. Shem came over as they were finishing breakfast to bring Perrin a report on tower completions in the south, or so he said. He sat down at the table in a slump and looked at nothing in particular. Perrin pushed his plate away. Well, this is different. Tired of bugs in your teeth? What? Perrin pointed at his face. The Shem grin is missing this morning. Trouble in paradise already? It's been, 10 weeks? 13, Shem sighed. 13. So you're actually keeping count? Didn't you? Not really. And now I'm wondering what else you're keeping count about. Shem glanced over to the kitchen when he heard Mari moving some dishes. Perrin, I'm a little worried. About what? Kella. She's so happy. Happy. That's a problem. Your wife's happy. Shem sighed. Oh, that's not exactly what I mean. He glanced at the kitchen door again to make sure it wasn't opening. I want her to be happy. I'm happy. It's just that she's not. Perrin held up his hands, waiting for the rest. Sick, Shem whispered. Sick? Shem gestured in emphasis. Sick. Perrin sat back. Oh, that kind of sick. It's not that pleasant, trust me. The first time my bride was sick was when I came home from the first garter attack. Instead of greeting me with open arms and a passionate kiss, she gave me a mess all over the stairs. That's what I want! Shem nearly cried before remembering he didn't want Mari to hear him. What I meant was, I know, Perrin said, but Shem, give it time. This is nature at work, and sometimes nature won't be rushed. Didn't one of your sisters wait nearly 4 years before her first sick? Shem leaned forward. She was 20 when she married. She could afford for nature to be slow. Kala and I can't. I've done the math. You and Mari must have already known Jatsi was on her way by this point in your marriage. Kala's close to the same age as Mari was, and you had 2 children before your 2nd anniversary. Perrin couldn't hide his smile of pride, although he was working on that. As fast as they came, had we lived in Salem, we'd probably have 18 children by now. Not sure what Mari would have thought about that. He stopped when he saw Shem's dejection. So, Perrin, what are we doing wrong? Perrin didn't have the opportunity to answer. Nothing, Shem. Mari burst through the kitchen door and rushed over to him to give him a hug from behind. Perrin cringed in sympathy as Shem went bright red. Mari, how long were you listening in? Perrin demanded as Mari released Shem and sat down at the table next to him. Long enough. Shem, give it time. Why, there's that couple in the congregation, the ones who lost their spouses and now are in their 2nd marriages. That man just fathered a baby and he's nearly 60. Shem was still red. I wasn't exactly expecting you to hear any of this. And his wife is 45, Mari forged on, missing his chagrin. You have time, Shem. Kala has probably 15 years. Shem shielded his eyes in embarrassment, hiding from her sympathetic look. Nothing like the presence of a woman to kill awkward man talk. Perrin glared at his wife. She gave him back a questioning look. Perrin sighed and turned to Shem. She has a point, Shem. Don't put deadlines on nature. Just enjoy this time the 2 of you have together, alone. Once the children come, there goes the privacy. Mari and I are still waiting to get it back. Shem stared at Perrin's empty dish. But what if they never come? Understanding Shem's real worry, Perrin said, What do you remember of Hogel and Tabit Densel? The Densels? Shem looked up. I knew them only a year, but they were probably the best couple I ever met. They were, Perrin said. They changed my life. They did a great deal of good for a great many people. They held edge together. I can't imagine a couple who would have been greater parents. Shem gazed blankly at the table again. But they weren't. Perrin shook his head. Never blessed with children. I was the closest thing they had to a son. Do you think they weren't worthy to be parents? Do you think that was the Creator's punishment? To be stuck with Perrin? Mari added. Shem smiled briefly. No, not their punishment. Just part of their test, Shem, Perrin said. Shem sighed. I was just so sure, especially since Guide Gleese said I'd be facing my wife's childbirthing in a year. Did he say that as the guide or as Gleese? Perrin asked. Because I've seen his eyes when he's the guide. There's something different there. Most of the time he's just Hugh, isn't he? Shem shrugged. I was still thinking about his vision when he mentioned it. I just wonder if we've done anything wrong. If the Creator is displeased with us. He ended in a whisper. If the children come, they come, Mari said. If they don't, you're still 2 people who found each other when no one ever thought you would marry. Still miraculous. Shem reluctantly smiled. Thanks. Consider this, Mari said. If someone like Cain Thorne can be allowed to reproduce and give the world Lemuel, doesn't that tell you the Creator usually just lets nature follow its laws? Shem scoffed a sad laugh. I think the Creator started nature and stands back most of the time to let it run its course, Mari said. He intervenes when necessary, but otherwise, Shem, just wait. But I've already waited for so many years. He stood up abruptly. I need to be going. Kala asked me to do a few things before I go over to the guides. I just wanted to see you before you left, Perrin. Say hi to the Travados for us, will you? Of course, Perrin said. Shem turned to Mari. Thanks for your concern, he said with soft eyes. But then they hardened as he pointed at her. But if you say a word of this, or give any looks, any communication, to my sisters, I will never speak to you again. Not a word, not a look, nothing. And to think, Shem mumbled as he headed to the door, that I was excited about all of us coming to live in Salem together. Mari smiled at the door after he shut it. Perrin cleared his throat. Mari turned to her husband. How could you? How could I what? Interfere. Didn't you see how embarrassed he was? Mari smirked. He'll forgive me soon enough. How do you know? Wait. Perrin leaned toward her. What do you know? She smiled smugly. Remember my first prediction this morning? Kala's so happy because she isn't feeling the kind of sick Shem's expecting. Not every woman conforms to your little list, Perrin. Shem will be grinning again soon enough. Perrin sat back. Why didn't you give him a hint? He's miserable. What, I'm supposed to tell him what his wife asked me about in confidence? Guess what, Shem? I'm almost positive you're going to be a father, from what Kala and I could figure out yesterday, in about 32 weeks. She came to speak to me since she doesn't have a mother or a mother-in-law in the area, and she really didn't want to talk to any of Shem's sisters about her suspicions. Believe it or not, I have learned to keep my mouth shut sometimes. Perrin stared at her in wonder. Salem really is a place of miracles, isn't it? Lieutenant Radin glanced again at the note secreted in his gloved palm. The instructions had been specific, so even though he hadn't been to the garrison in Idemia for a few years, he easily got around. What confused him, however, was that the anonymous note had been delivered with caution to not reveal his destination with anyone. He had no idea why he had to leave Scrub to go all the way to the garrison, and in the pouring rain, no less. His commandant didn't seem surprised when he was ordered to go. Then again, the man had many friends in Idemia. That filled Radin with both dread and hope. Dread that maybe he'd done something wrong. Hope that maybe he'd done something right. Lately, he couldn't tell which was which. So he'd spent the last 2 frigid, wet days traveling, and this morning spent hours following clues, sending him from one location to another. Each new slip of paper gave him another destination, and now he was no longer worried, but annoyed. He trudged up the steps to the 4th floor of the garrison's office building, where there were considerably fewer men in blue suits in the quiet halls. He still wore his overcoat, one of the requirements, to make sure his uniform's label of Radin was covered, and wished he could take it off, since he was working up a sweat. Down an empty corridor he walked, past rooms which may have been vacant, until he found the door with the correct number. This better be the end, he said under his breath, and opened it. He was startled to see Advising General Snyde seated at a desk in an otherwise empty room. I was beginning to think you'd never get here, he growled. Took you long enough. Shut the door. Radin obediently did so, but had to say, Respectfully, sir, I would have gotten here a lot sooner had the original note just said, Go to 4th floor, room 18. I had to make sure you weren't followed, Snide said, as if that were obvious. And I had to take an even more circuitous route than you did, I assure you. May I ask why, sir? Snide gestured for him to take the empty chair in front of him. Because, he whispered, Chairman Mal keeps a tight rope on all of us. I have to sign in and out of my own office. And if I'm gone for more than an hour, someone comes looking for me, as if I'm a teenager who can't be trusted. Raiden nearly mentioned that it was because the advising general was sneaking around, meeting officers on the sly, that someone might think he wasn't trustworthy, but he decided to let that go. And that's why you're here, Lieutenant, who I'm sure is tired of being merely a lieutenant? Snide raised his eyebrows. What can I help you with, sir? You have information that no one else has, except for maybe another lieutenant who is also serving an edge. About? Snide sat back. I'll be blunt. Everything went wrong as soon as they put Cain Thorne in charge of the army. His arrogance led to his incompetence, which led to his own son's failures, as well as Genev's. Mal's scared of everything right now, but most particularly Cain Thorne. He needs him removed, if you get my meaning. Why doesn't the chairman just eliminate him? Raiden said, if you get my meaning. Because Mal doesn't want him just gone. He wants him humiliated and his reputation destroyed. Then, with him deposed, it'll be easier to reconstruct the army and government. All the blame for the increased controls, the commandants, everything can be set squarely on Cain Thorne, who will then crumble and stink like a corpse. Raiden chanced to smile. And Mal still smells like a rose. Snide scowled at the analogy. Yes, something like that. Raiden tried again. And new High General Snide, in charge of the army, will restore it to its former glory. That won him over, for the moment. Something like that, yes. But I need evidence from people who really know. Not know whatever Geneve told you to tell everyone, but the real truth. Raiden swallowed at that. The real truth was rather squishy in his head. He'd have to remold it, and quick. Does Chairman Mal know I'm here? No, Snide said, leaning forward on the empty desk. I'm hoping to present him with favorable evidence. I do him a favor, then he does me a favor, and then I do you a favor. He couldn't get any closer without laying on the desk. So, what really happened in the forest above Edge that night the Shins went missing? Did you witness Lemuel Thorne beheading Shem Zenas? Raiden hesitated. He hadn't seen any of that, since he and most of his men had already left the forest. But before he could think of how to phrase it, Snide fished something out of his jacket, an official parchment. The general unfolded it, laid it on the desk, and slid it over to where Raiden could read it. To whom it may concern, be it known that Lieutenant Raiden is to be promoted immediately to the rank of Major. That was as far as Raiden could read before the general whisked the parchment back into his pocket. If that helps to jog your memory, that is, as soon as I have that favorable evidence I want, that document gets dated and sent to your commandant, along with transfer orders to anywhere you wish. So, what can you tell me about Zenas? Raiden had an answer, and he tried not to salivate as he said, 2 of my men helped capture the man Thorne beheaded, and while he was strong, he wasn't as large as Zenas, nor was he dressed like him. He was wearing green and brown mottled clothing. Snide sat taller. I knew it! And Perrin Shin, did you see him fall into the crevice? Raiden had missed all of that too, but he could honestly answer, no, I didn't see him fall, nor Mari Shin. Snide slapped the desk in glee, not caring that someone lost in the corridor might hear him. Tell me about the Brighters. Did you see Mr. and Mrs. Brighter? Raiden hesitated, then said, I saw someone who could have been Mr. Brighter, but they used a decoy for Jatesy Brighter. Unless she sprouted a beard. I heard strange things can happen when a woman's expecting. So you did not see her. Snide was so eager he was nearly crawling onto the desk. You didn't see her die, right? That's correct, sir. A few men said, but they won't remember this anymore, that Zenas, the Shins, and their son and son-in-law rode up the hillside and vanished. I knew it! Snide screamed in a whisper and did a wiggle dance in his chair that seemed more appropriate for a 5-year-old rather than a 50-year-old. I knew it! I knew it! I knew it! And, more importantly, Lemuel Thorne knows it too. Raiden frowned. Well, yes, he would, but Genev's been working on him for several moons now, sir. Don't you think he might be misremembering things? Snide shook his head. Lemuel's still pining for Jatesy, I know, because my wife has been trying to help my niece Drusus win him over. Not that Drusus is much to look at, but now neither is Lemuel Thorne. Who wants a cripple like that? But Cain thinks matching them will create some kind of unity. Snide rolled his eyes. And frankly, it'd do both of us a favor. Since my brother and his wife died of the pox, Drusus has been staying with us. It's time she moved on. And Lemuel can't be too picky anymore. But, Snide went on, Drusus and my wife returned from Edge last week, quite disappointed. Lemuel can't get over Jatesy, and I think it's because he knows she's still out there somewhere. He finished in a whisper. Guess he thought she was rather beautiful, but I wasn't too impressed when I met her. This is proof that the Thornes and Geneve lied about what happened, and that scandal will be their ultimate downfall. So, will you help? Raiden was surprised that more was required of him. Yes, sir. How do I help? You were in the forest, correct? Raiden squirmed. Yes. You'll go back. What? Not alone. With someone else who was in the forest that night. Raiden's alarm was exchanged for chagrin. Sir, you're not talking about Lieutenant Offra, are you? Yes, I was going to send for him next. Don't, Raiden cut him off. Offra's weak. Geneve really got to him, and I don't think Offra could keep everything as well balanced as I can. We can surely use him in the forests. Offra loved Colonel Shin and would be happy to look for him, but don't let Offra in on your intentions about using this information. Snide smiled slyly and said, You mean don't show him a parchment with his name on it, also promoting him to major, correct? Raiden bobbed his head. Sir, he didn't realize he was slurring that word again. However you wish to reward Offra for his service is wholly up to you. But you certainly don't want to risk diminishing the honorable office of major by allowing just anyone to become one, correct? I understand you, Lieutenant. Very well. Now then, he said, all business. This is certainly not the season to be traipsing around in the forest, nor should the idea of an investigation seem to come from anyone but Lemuel Thorne. Sir? Raiden raised his eyebrows. Why? Snide spread out his hands in front of him. It will make the treachery of Cain Thorne all the more delicious if it's his son who accidentally betrays him, don't you think? This all has to be Lemuel's doing, or undoing. Raiden wasn't entirely following it all, but slowly nodding his head gave the appearance that he was in agreement. The cat has to be punished, you understand, Snide whispered, for letting the falcon fly out of the barn. The best way to punish him is by kitten ambush. Raiden kept up the slow nodding, wondering if the advising general had lost his mind for a moment, and hoping that he'd change the subject. Fortunately, he did. So, Lieutenant, it is you who will plant the suggestion in Lemuel's mind, then feed it over the next several moons. The general was pulling a piece of paper from the desk, along with ink and quills. Beginning today, you will write him a letter suggesting that you've heard rumors that the Shins are still alive, especially Jatesy Brighter, and that you're worried those rumors may have reached him. You don't want him to be disturbed by them, you see, since he's still struggling with his health, but you wanted him to be aware that word was spreading quietly among the soldiers. Raiden was already writing the words and snickering. This will drive him completely to distraction, he chuckled. If others think it's possible they're still alive, then so can he, Snide said. You're not as slow-witted as I worried you might be. We have to address this as something dull and muck it up a bit. Genev's reading everything interesting that goes through the mail service, so we have to make this uninteresting. Once you get a reply, let me know, and I'll tell you what to write him next to get him planning. Yes, sir, Raiden said, writing carefully. Then, I suppose, when all of this Jatesy nonsense is finally resolved, Lemuel will marry your niece? Most likely, Snide said, sounding bored. Yes, sir, but sir, Raiden said as he signed the letter, I have just one concern about all of this. Yes, Snide took the letter and folded it. What if we find evidence that the Shins or Jatesy Brighter is indeed still alive? Snide stopped in mid-fold and stared at Raiden. Alive? Where? He scoffed. No, they're dead. I'm sure of it. But not because of anything the Thorns did, because the Thorns let them escape, let them fall to some kind of terrible fate. Snide's eyes bounced around the room, realizing that he'd never before entertained the thought that they could still be living. So, Raiden began as segments of the story shifted rapidly in his mind. The Shins and Brighters were chased away by the Thorns, which then caused their tragic fate. Had the Thorns handled things better, we may still have Perrin Shin, and even his grandson, still with us. Half of Snide's face lifted into a relieved smile. Yes, something like that. Not bad at all, with a bit of working. He slipped the folded letter into his jacket pocket. Write to me, Lieutenant, Snide said as he stood up. Extending his hand to shake Raiden's, he added, Good to have this little chat. We here at the garrison like to make sure our junior officers are looking forward to promotion. Raiden also got to his feet, since the interview was clearly over. Thank you for your concern, sir. And if I may add, should the opportunity arise, I'd be happy to take over the command at Fort Shin and Edge. I understand they're looking for a major to be in charge. He blinked innocently. Snide smiled. If all goes as it should, perhaps Fort Shin should be renamed Fort Raiden, in honor of the officer who helped High General Snide uncover the biggest scandal in the Army's history. Have a safe journey back to Scrub. Lemuel Thorne clenched the message in his fist and made his way through the snow to his horse's private corral. In the shelter of his personal tackle shed, he unfolded the message, dropping it only twice, which was an improvement. He smirked at the words on the outside, in a sloppy hand which read, Further details as to saddling one's horse with only one hand, revised and updated as per Captain Thorne's requests. The message's contents appeared so dull, and smelled so much like manure, with actual samples smeared across the back, that Geneve didn't even want to touch it. Instead, he flung the message in the direction of Lemuel. Ask them to wash up before they send you any more advice. It was the fourth message from the stables at Pools. They first started in harvest and now continued into raining season. except that the message wasn't from Pools. It was from Raiden, who was proving to be far more clever than Lemuel had expected. Disguising his writing, scrawling nonsensically, and filling the pages with drawings of crude and occasionally rude horses, had convinced Commandant Genève that Lemuel was receiving suggestions about how he could ride again, not how to plan the rescue of Jatsi Shin. But that's what they were doing, with sentences buried in the scribbles. Raiden had confirmed Lemuel's greatest hopes. A few men had seen the Shins escape. But more importantly, a handful of silent soldiers had seen Jatsi getting away alone. She'd found a cave, someone told Raiden privately, and the soldiers lost her in it. But it was a secure cave, perfect for hiding in. Lemuel had imagined that cave 1,000 times in his mind. If she had a food supply and water, she could stay there for weeks, moons, even years. She and her son, awaiting rescue. And Raiden was willing to help. His message today said he'd requested 3 weeks off and would be in Edge by the time the snows receded in planting season. But he would need a partner. Lemuel nodded at that. He already knew who to ask. Lieutenant Afra. He'd loved the Shins so much he'd be stupid enough to venture into the forest looking for them. While Lemuel doubted any of them were smart enough to survive, he was sure that his dear beloved Jatsi and her son were braving the wilds, holed up in that cave, keeping back the bears and wolves with sticks she sharpened and fires she made, clutching her baby and bravely stabbing at any creature that tried to harm them. He sat down, again overwhelmed by the images. They were the most vivid during the hour after the surgeon gave him a vial. Not only did the new formula ease the pain, it heightened his thoughts, making them sharp and vibrant. Right now, the effect was diminishing again, but still he could see her black ponytail, disheveled and messy, her dress tattered and ripped in interesting places, and her son watching with dark brown eyes as he was pressed against her heaving bosom. If only Lemuel could ride! If only he didn't need the vials every 4 hours, he'd be there at that cave, whisking her away from all of that and embracing the baby, his son. But he was doing the next best thing. Carefully, he pulled out the inkwell from his pocket and set it on the tackle cabinet, then the paper and the quills, and set to writing as neatly as he could a letter to John Afra. Hopefully the man was smart enough to read between the lines. And that's the end of that chapter. Thank you.